Hello everyone. So today we're talking reparations. This is the second video of two. The first one was my quick rundown of why reparations are being requested. In this video here, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what they would look like, how they would be paid for, and why they should be given. So what would reparations look like? Reparations, or a recompense, is not just some broad and unrestrained cash disbursement of huge lump sums of money to every black person in the country. It's not that simple. The depth and intricacy of the systems and tools leveraged against the black community is vast, and they operated in different ways and levied various effects on both black community and resulting effects on non-blacks. Thus, the solutions or remedies will need to have a matching difference in approach between them. By definition, a very basic reparations bill can include satisfaction, rehabilitation, compensation, restitution, and guarantees of non-repetition. That's what a well-rounded reparations package should look like for one of the most heinous violations of international human rights. In this case, it also must be multi-generational in order to restore the multi-generational harm that has been done to us. It cannot be done in just a year or two. Maybe the monetary reparations portion might be 1 or 2 generations, but other set-asides may go on for much longer. What is satisfaction? Satisfaction is the end of the public denial of this history, ending the hiding of the truth, and enacting mass public education to put the world in an educated space as to what really happened to the black community to get us to the situation we're in today. That means also a public apology, including a full acknowledgement of the facts and the acceptance of responsibility for everything from slavery to mass incarceration needs to happen, including commemorations and tributes to our people, in particular victims, especially those who died at the hands of police officers under the Obama administration in the years. And also, inclusion of an accurate account of these violations that occurred needs to be written into human rights law, international human rights law training. And particularly important is going to be the updating of the true and extensive accounts in our history textbooks of what has really happened. And that has to happen at all schools across the nation, especially in the southern United States, instead of the generalized, watered down, and disingenuous garbage we have in many schools right now. I also mentioned rehabilitation. That's definitely on the list. As Yvette Carnell coined this term, lineage therapy, I think it fits very well with this idea. The entire community of the DOAS people, or American Descendants of Slavery, need a safe, supportive space to confront and openly discuss and process what has happened to our people, how it has manifested into the present day conditions, and to develop healthy working relationships with one another for moving forward as we begin to heal. We need emotional repair and ancestral reviews within our own nuclear families and expanded families as well. And in many urban areas, we have been at war with each other over street corners and scraps, especially in places like Detroit and Chicago. We need to develop plans for our communities, how we want them to be, and our people on what we are going to do to fortify the good portions of our communities and our culture, and what things we may choose to reconfigure. We need capacity building. We especially will need to spark or foster self-interest in long-term entrepreneurial, political, and social institution building as part of the fortification of our community. We must enact robust financial literacy training specifically and deeply develop for our community before much of any monetary cash benefits will begin arriving. And the cost of all this therapy and redevelopment should be included in and covered by the reparations package itself. Monetary reparation is a replenishment of a previously inflicted loss by the criminal to the victim. Part of this may be a monetary restitution and or a compensation for loss. Americans stole from the Black community, then used the stolen principal to make additional gains. The community is owed all of what was wrongly taken in various forms as compensation and an appropriate proportion of all of the ill-gotten gains as restitution. In 40 Acres and a Mule in the 21st century, Sandy Darity indicates a vision of a portfolio of reparations where anywhere from $1 to $6 trillion would be allocated for cash payments alone. These payments could be monthly checks to qualified individuals, or the money could be put into a trust fund wherein eligible Blacks could apply for grants for various asset building projects, as I mentioned before, including home ownership, additional education, or startup funds for entrepreneurial endeavors. Also, receiving of any of these reparations would have qualifications, criteria that must be met before anything will be given. These could be things such as providing positive proof as being a descendant of persons of formerly enslaved people from the United States and having identified as being Black for at least the past 10 years on federal documentation. There may be other requirements or exceptions developed based off of actual research findings that the Truth and Reconciliation hearings would bring forward, which I am a big proponent of having that set of hearings here in the United States. Now, last but not least, guarantees of non-repetition. In this particular case, I would say that we need law and policy that will specifically provide on priority and continued basis human rights education to all sectors of society and training for law enforcement officials. That includes deep, transformative initiatives of policing practices, social education programs, and various other new and revised laws and policies that create tight protections of Blacks from the historical predatory practices which have oppressed our communities. We need these guarantees in writing and to be enforced from a federal government level down to the community police officer walking the beat. It has to be enacted. It has to be enforced for our protection. Additionally, there should be corrective actions taken to rectify specific institutional issues which were born out of or used to further our systemic oppression. Racism in the police forces, underfunding of our HBCUs, poorly constructed infrastructure in Black majority areas, and holding banks accountable which pillaged our people. They need to give us loans or they need to get out of business. This is what government is supposed to do. Ensure we are not mistreated based on our race or our lineage, and to serve justice if we are. These are just a few of the things that need to be transformed before we can hope to truly have access to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness long term, even after receiving any form of financial monetary reparations. Now, who is going to pay for reparations? The funny thing about all of this is America wouldn't be here where it is today without all of these oppressive, destructive systems I just mentioned. That means you wouldn't have your social or economic advantages you've been afforded in past or present. Everyone loves America, including the immigrants who continue to come here to this day. So, this land of great opportunity, which now allows people to visit from all across the world and even has birthright citizenship, has a foundation built off of the backs of Blacks, the most abused people in this country. And in some cases, you could even say white people were harmed by these systems too, but they were collateral damage. They were not the intended targets, outside of maybe sharecropping in some cases. But nevertheless, the American federal government is the hub of all of this and is the primary debtor being charged with payment of this historical bill. Now, how the government comes up with that money is up to the government. But we know many people will think that it will be in the form of raising taxes across the board. That's not necessarily true. We don't know that. The study hasn't been done to prove or disprove that. We don't know how the responsibility of the charges will be divvied up between new or existing federal revenues, state monies, or even corporate trusts that have a legacy of being particularly intertwined with racial oppression. So try to hold off on jumping to a conclusion on that just yet. You need to have a substantial discussion and real research behind what has happened. Instead, how about we push these congressional leaders to support a formal discussion and investigation on what needs to be done in order to bring this forward? We know a lot is old, and that's not up for debate. But how much exactly in the amount of recompense driven by each of these acts requires economists, and researchers to formally engage with lawmakers on the subject? You don't know the answer particularly personally, neither do we. So stop the authoritative pontification guised as reality. We need to do the work. Just like the South African Truth and Reconciliation hearings covering the atrocities of apartheid, we need our own commission here in this country as well. Also, let's say taxes do get changed a bit. I'll tell you now, you don't get to cop out on a bill just because you can't or don't want to pay for it, unless you're going to leave the country or file for bankruptcy. America can't discharge genocide from its credit report, and the UN has already indicted us. Most Americans have been able to enjoy the privileges afforded by definition to the citizens of such a grand country as this, but at a disproportionately cheap rate by way of denying an entire subset of the overall U.S. population the same privileges through their textbook abuse and enacting debilitating economic extraction and tyranny upon them for hundreds of years. Now, with reparations, the cost of citizenship may actually become what it truly should have been all along. So when the past due bill for all the unpaid labor, all the unaddressed crimes, and the moral ineptitude comes due, you bet if the feds can't finagle away, everyone may have to pay. Also, the fact that you are a resident or a citizen of this country means you are a shareholder of, even if unwittingly, of stock in a public body corporate that has this history on its hands. Now, I'm not here to run a guilt trip on anyone for the things that people have done in the past, but you can't escape this just by saying that you specifically didn't pull the trigger. That the entire nation benefited from these ill-gotten gains. That's the finicky thing about living in a sovereign nation, especially one motivated by capitalism. The country isn't going to fall off, the face of this earth. It's going to be leveled up. It's going to become more of the equitable land we project ourselves as internationally to the globe. The land that people risk their lives to get here in hopes of having a better life. So you either let it happen and allow this country to reach its moral, ethical, and legal high ground demanded of such a position of a progressive, democratic global leadership, or you relinquish your citizenship. This will never go away. This will never and must never be forgotten. So, in layman's terms, given the broad and nationally underpinning nature of this atrocity, the reparations package may be funded through a special blend of revenues, using some existing general tax revenue, a mandatory special federal tax, asset sales, and federal liens or lawsuits against private or foreign entities who are found guilty of agnostic conspiracy of or if they're particular beneficiaries of any of the aforementioned components of Black economic oppression in this country. Again, the political and economic imagination and tools need to be developed and employed to address this step of the process, but it is far from impossible. This is not impossible. And I personally will never accept impossible as an answer for the strife of my ancestors and what they went through, and neither did the victims of the apartheid or the Holocaust. Why should reparations be given then? Well, I've given you a ton of reasons. I've spoken on it in the prior video, but because every human in this world deserves a fair, equitable shot at their God-given potential on par with the starting point set up for them by their parents and the country they live in. However, many African-American parents were held down generation after generation. Just like you want the world, we do too. That's how the United Nations sees it. That's how most people across the globe see it. And that's what the Constitution insinuates. That's how most Americans claim to see it as well. Now's the time to put that belief to the ultimate test. No formal apology has ever been received from any U.S. federal government entity for the atrocities of slavery, Jim Crow, or mass discrimination. Within reasonable scope of the law, in reflection of global and local precedents, with adjustment for economic growth of this country in question, what is being asked is only reasonable to those who are, it's only unreasonable to those who are ignorant to the facts, possess an unwillingness to employ political and economic imagination, or just plain evil. This step to continue improving the best country in the world will require facing the truth and ingenuity. African Americans have made countless life-changing contributions to American society, and the imparted cultural swag this whole world swoons over is a birthright that this country got from us. Cutting us short is cutting America short. Providing the aforementioned restitution, compensation, and supporting programs will create serious lift of a good portion of the American economy, not just blacks, stimulating quality job growth, reducing crime, reducing annualized costs of running the criminal justice system, and deepening America's position as the global moral high ground. Many other benefits will come from this as well. Like any all lives matter such answers that are class-based economic programs or flat out denial of racialized social economic need at all. As a response to the demand for reparations, those type of responses show a blatant disregard, not only for African Americans, but for this country's moral future as well. Anyone actually speaking like that has no intention of keeping this country great. We will not stand for it, and we will never give up. So I want to thank you for taking some time to watch this. I'm Vel. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, I look forward to chatting it up with you in the comments below. And let's have the discussion. Thank you.